So after day one of the second test in Adelaide, it's time for Ask George. Don Topley asks, should England be playing their very best keeper?
Well, it's nice to hear from Don Topley. I loved him in Friends. I always hoped that he'd end up with Courtney Cox. That was my dream. England should be playing their best keeper. They should. As it happens, I think their best keeper is Ben Foakes. And I think he'd probably end up scoring more runs than Jos Buttler. But anyway, look, Jos Buttler had a bad day. He did take one very good catch, and he has helped England win a World Cup with a brilliant bit of work at the end of the game, which other people might not have managed. And I don't want to have a go at him, but he missed he missed 2 chances today, and he's missed 3 chances in the series. And the last of them was about as bad as it gets at test level. I just think that he'd be better if he was released to be the great white ball player that we know he can be. And I think role specialisation would be really helpful in English cricket, and Josh should be allowed to be a white ball player. So yeah, I think Ben Foakes should be the England wicketkeeper. I've thought that for a long time, and today was a reminder.
Robert Anderson asks, is it fair to acknowledge that Anderson and Broad are the best bowlers of my lifetime, but still scream, pitch it up at the TV half the time they're bowling?
Well, I don't know how old you are, and maybe you don't remember Andrew Caddick. But it is basically very fair to say what you just said there. I thought they had a day which was particularly frustrating. I mean, Anderson in particular didn't make people play often enough. I thought Broad in his first spell did. He was probably the pick of the bowlers. But Anderson, if the ball's not swinging and it wasn't swinging, it's always been a bit of a frustration that he is very defensive because he hates going for runs, and that's a good quality in lots and lots of ways. But he just hangs the ball back a little bit and you want him to pitch it up. But maybe, I've come to the conclusion, maybe he knows best.
Jeffrey asks, is this 2019, are we at Mount Maunganui because Jack Leach seems to be the one punished for the batting falling apart again?
Mount Maunganui, crikey. I don't know that he's been punished. He did get smashed around Brisbane pretty badly. I think I would have played him in this game, but I don't think it's an unreasonable decision not to have done. I don't know that he's been punished. I mean, they just don't think he turns it that much, and they think that opposition teams will come at him. And I think it's a bit naive to think that he would have been the point of difference on day one of this game. He might have been useful in the second innings. Would he have made a massive difference on day one? I think that's wishful thinking.
Alif asks, is Robinson the only thing England have found since they started planning to get the urn back?
Yeah, pretty much. England have produced very few good test players since 2013, and Robinson is one of the very few that has the potential to be a lot better than that. Jofra is another one, obviously. There's a lot to like about Ollie Robinson. I thought he looked a little bit below his best today, but actually, he's hardly played much Test cricket and he's taken to it brilliantly. Yeah, basically, whoever asked the question is right. Ollie Robinson is doing a lot to admire. He bowled well again.
Jeremy Surtees asks, is Woakes in the side more for his batting than his bowling?
You see, I reckon, Jeremy Surtees, you've woken up there, looked at the scorecard and made a decision, because I saw Woakesy beat the bats several times. I reckon he could have had Labuschagne out, caught behind half a dozen times or more. And sometimes, luck plays a part. So Chris Woakes is in the side because he's a good cricketer. I think he made his debut as number 6, didn't he, in 2013. I thought he bowled pretty well. I'd love him to pitch 6 inches a yard fuller. I really would. And be a bit bolder. But, England really value bowling dry. And he could have taken wickets really, really easily today. I mean, he did beat the bat by millimetres several times. So I think that's a bit harsh.
Steve Holford asks, is picking the England side like it's a perennial April in Chelmsford a sustainable approach?
No. I mean, that's a really key question. So, county cricket, I love county cricket, I really do, but it's not really breeding players to play Test cricket anymore because the conditions in which they play county championship cricket have no bearing on how Test cricket is played across the world. So, it's hugely problematic, and the fact is we haven't developed very many fast bowlers, very many spinners, very many top order batters since, for 10 years or so, and that's a huge problem. And a lot of it, I think, is down to the fact that we don't play county cricket throughout the season on decent wickets.
Daniel Chapman asks, England going into this without Wood and a spinner defies logic, doesn't it?
And I don't define logic. So many of these decisions are reasonable. You don't have to agree with them. Look, it was a very flat wicket today. It's slow. It's got long, dry grass, which I think takes the pace out of the ball. So England decided that they would bowl dry and try and frustrate Australia, which is a reasonable tactic. Would have done that. Or maybe he would have had the pace to burst through. Maybe he would. Or maybe the ball just would have come onto the bat better. I don't know the answer. We never will. I would have picked him, for what it's worth. I definitely would have picked him. In terms of Leach, he didn't have a good previous game. There were lots of left-handers on the side. What would have happened? You can't say that it's unreasonable to have left it out. Did he go for 9 and over? The last test he played? You can't say it's unreasonable to leave him out. So it's not beyond logic. But I take the point.
Tom Dixon asks, if this does become a 5-0 series, do you think heads will roll, Silverwood and Root as captain?
5-0 would be pretty hard to take, wouldn't it? And it won't just be those guys. Look, I think that you have to have someone better. Who's the captain after Root? I don't know the answer. I genuinely don't know the answer. Who's the coach after Silverwood? Who's better? I mean, it's fine to have, pinata and just criticise these guys, but I don't think Silverwood's been handed a handful of aces. Personally, I think you've got to look much further up the food chain than that, and you've got to ask why the county schedule is so appalling, why the dominance of the white ball game is so overwhelming. And I think you've got to ask questions of Tom Harrison. So I think that's where the attention should be, and not on Root and Silverwood, who I think are trying to do decent jobs in almost impossible circumstances.
CB Chats asks, are England guilty of using plans made a month ago rather than reacting to pitches at the time?
Yeah, sure they are. Absolutely they are. They've been a bit too clever by half. I don't quite know why this has happened. I think maybe it's because they've got too many people on tour who are sort of management and want to justify themselves. But yeah, it's happened several times. I mean, it happened in the first test when, a better example is this test where they had decided not to play Mark Wood because he played the first test. But actually he rocked up absolutely fine, could have played, and they've decided to rest him for the latter half of the series. But what the hell is the point of resting him if they're 2-3-0 down, whatever? Play him now, seize the moment. And I think that's been the case with a lot of their plans. They're just a little bit too clever by half. It was the same probably at Brisbane where they decided they were going to bat, but actually the conditions were, sort of perfect for seam bowling. These things are reasonable most of the time, but I do think that England like to stick by their plans and they're not confident enough to be instinctive, and I think that's probably a reflection. I think that's how this side will be remembered. In the same way that, the Peter Moore's side very unfairly was remembered as data-driven, I think this side will be remembered for being plan-driven, and I think it's going to bring them down.